Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Parivrikacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrikacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. So, let's see where we are. Oh boy, is it 41 or 42? It's 41. Yeah, 41. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Page 295. No, page 294. 294. Okay. On this 20th day of September 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 6, Dhyana-yoga, the yoga of meditation. Text number 41 at the bottom of page 294. Prapya punnakutam lokan ushitva shashvatihi samaha shuchinam shrimatam gehe yoga bhrashto abhijayate prapya punnakutang lokan ushitva shasvati samaha shuchinang shrimatang gehe yoga bhrashto abhijayate prapya punnakutang lokan ushitva shasvati samaha shuchinang shrimatang gehe yoga bhrashto abhijayate prapya punnakutang lokan ushitva shasvati samaha shuchinang shrimatang gehe yoga bhrashto abhijayate prapya punnakritang lokan ushitva shasvati samaha shuchinam shrimatang gehe yoga bhrashto abhijayate prapya punnakritang lokan ushitva shasvati samaha shuchinang shrimatang gehe yoga bhrashto abhijayate
prapya punyam kritam lokan
prapya punnakritang lokan
ushpita saspita samahe
ushitva shasvati samaha
sushinam srimatam gehe
shuchinam shrimatang gehe
yoga bhrashto bijayate
yoga bhrashto abhijayate. That's right.
Prapya punya kritam lokan
Prapya punnakritang lokan
ushita saspati sama
ushitva shasvati samaha
sushinam shrimatam gehe
shuchinang shrimatang gehe
yoga brashtu bejayate.
yoga bhrashto abhijayate. Bob?
I'm good.
Okay. Anyone online? Zoom? Tapas, you there? Not here tonight. Okay, I'll read the synonyms and read along. Prapya, after achieving. Punya Kritam, of those who performed pious activities. Lokan, planets. Ushitva, after dwelling. Shasvatihi, many. Samaha, years. Shuchinam, of the pious. Shrimatam, of the prosperous. Gehe, in the house. Yoga Brashtaha, one who has fallen from the path of self-realization. Abhijayate, takes his birth. Translation. Krishna says to Arjuna, the unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people, or into a family of rich aristocracy. Purport. The unsuccessful yogis are divided into two classes. One has fallen after very little progress, and one has fallen after long practice of yoga. The yogi who falls after a short period of practice goes to the higher planets, where pious living entities are allowed to enter. After prolonged life there, one is sent back again to this planet to take birth in the family of a righteous Brahmin Vaishnav, or of aristocratic merchants. The real purpose of yoga practice is to achieve the highest perfection of Krishna consciousness, as explained in the last verse of this chapter. But those who do not persevere to such an extent and who fail because of material allurements are allowed, by the grace of the Lord, to make full utilization of their material propensities. And after that, they are given opportunities to live prosperous lives in righteous or aristocratic families. Those who are born in such families may take advantage of the facilities and try to elevate themselves to full Krishna consciousness. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Salakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Shri Parampara. So, let's compare. There's a wonderful account of Dhruva Maharaj. You may have heard of Dhruva, who became a yogi and performed severe austerities. But the yoga he was performing was a hybrid of this Ashtanga yoga, very severe meditation and controlling the breath, and bhakti, because his teacher was Narada Muni. Now he was in the previous age, I think he was in Satya Yuga. So this yoga was very prominent. But Narada Muni wasn't about to teach him pure Ashtanga yoga, simply meditating on the Super Soul. And so I'll tell you a little story. What happened with Dhruva, some of you may not know the story. He was the son of King Uttanapada. And he was the elder son. He was just a boy, 5 years old. And his father had another wife who he was more favorable than to Dhruva's mother. And so one day, the boys were playing in the palace, and Dhruva's half-brother climbed onto the lap of the father. And Dhruva was trying to get on there too, and his stepmother said, "No, you can't get on there. You have to take birth again from my womb, and then you can come on." And the father didn't say anything. And so Dhruva was hurt to the quick. And so he ran to his own mother, who had a room in the palace, some distance, it was a big palace, and told her what had happened. And it's interesting, the names are always important, Dhruva's name means very determined, fixed. That was his name. His mother's name was called Suniti. Suniti means very virtuous. But his stepmother's name was Suruchi, which means very attractive. So the father had become more attracted to the attractive wife than to the virtuous wife. There was no great sin going on here, but you can see the dynamics. So Dhruva asked his mother, "What should I do? How can I want to get a kingdom. I want the kingdom, or a kingdom even greater than my father's." So she said, "I can't help you because I'm not your father's favored wife anymore. But God can help you." Now, I've never seen this little part of the pastime, but Prabhupada always tells it this way. It's not exactly in the Bhagavatam, but there are different versions. So Dhruva said, "Well, where can I find him?" He's a simple boy, he's 5 years old. And the mother says, "Well, I've heard that the great sages and saints, they go out to the forest to find God. So that's where you can find him." "Okay, I'm going." So he just started going out, 5-year-old boy. So he's headed, he's Dhruva, he's fixed. So Narada Muni, he comes down. He always gives just the right instruction for the candidate. Very skilled. Narada means he who delivers the people. He gives bhakti wherever he goes. He's very prominent in Bhagavatam. So he encounters Dhruva, and then he tests him. You think, "Well, what's up?" And Dhruva explains, "I'm going to find God in the forest so that I can get a bigger kingdom than my father." It's kind of a childish thing. So Narada says, "Oh, you're too young. There's very austere and dangerous animals are there. You go back, and then when you're older, you come and I'll teach you all about yoga." And Narada, Dhruva is very respecting to Narada. And he said, "My dear sage, if you can't help me directly, then I'm going anyway. I'm going to find God." So Narada saw how determined he was, and he gave him this hybrid yoga. He taught him, "Well, you go out and you chant this mantra." We all know this mantra. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. That has the name of God in it, name of Krishna. Chant this mantra, and you perform severe pranayama. The story of Dhruva, you probably heard it. And he taught him the rudimentary deity worship. Believe it or not, when you're out in the forest, you're near a stream, you can take mud from that bank of the stream and make a rudimentary deity and worship it, flowers, whatever else you can come up with, fruits. And that counts. You can worship it. And then you can dissolve the deity and then build another one the next day. This is authorized, it's bona fide. So he was doing that, and he was chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and he was also performing pranayama and controlling his breath. And so what happened was that in a few months he became very proficient in these, and he was so what the yogis do, they slow down the breath, and in this way they prolong their life. You breathe very rhythmically, and you're inhaling and holding, all this. So Dhruva was doing that, and he was so good at it that he had entrained the universal breathing, and the demigods were feeling short of breath, as if they had COVID or something, So they went to Vishnu, and they said, "Can you do something? Please go down there and and get him off of this thing." So he came down. Dhruva was meditating on Vishnu, chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and meanwhile he reduced his eating, practically nothing. Just living on the breath, very austere. And in about 6 months, is really quick. He had achieved this very high state. So he's meditating on Vishnu in the heart. This was another part of his yoga. And suddenly he can't see Vishnu in the heart. He opens his eyes, and there's Vishnu on Garuda. He's come down before him. And he just goes into ecstasy. It describes how he was crying, he was rolling on the ground. It describes that every one of his senses seemed to be devouring the Vishnu. In other words, he was completely consumed. And then finally he was able to say some prayers. Actually, what happened is he was touched on the head by the conch. Because he's just a 5-year-old. He didn't have time to study Sanskrit or anything. So he was given the inspiration of how to do it. And so he started offering these prayers. And one of the prayers he offered is not in the Bhagavatam, but this is the most famous one. It's in another Purana, maybe Padma Purana. So here's the prayer that he offers. Remember, he was so adamant, to get that kingdom, to just show his stepmother, it was kind of a childish motivation. But it all had been dovetailed in this wonderful realization of God, of Krishna, Vishnu. So he says like this, Sthana Bilashis Tapasis Titoham Tvam Prapta Vande Vumanindra Guyam Kacham Vichindvan Habidibhiratnam Svaman Kratatosmi Vadang Neyache. That last line probably would often quote alone. So what it means is that I was longing for a position, Sthana Bilashi, greater than my grandfathers. He wanted a kingdom greater than Brahma's. This is how far back this is. It's like near the beginning of the universe. And so, tapasya, and therefore I was situated in great tapasya, austerity. But now I've gotten you, Tvam Praptavan, Devam and Indraguyam, who are hidden away even from the greatest yogis and munis. To get a personal vision of Vishnu is very difficult. You can see him in the heart, but to see him personally outside is very hard. So now I realize, Kacham Bichinvan, that what I was looking for was equivalent to broken glass, this great kingdom. Brahma's kingdom, or my whatever. It's just like broken glass. Api Divya Ratna, but I have achieved the rare jewel of your direct darshan. And so the result is that, oh my Lord, Swaman Katartosmi Varangniyache, I don't want anything else. Your darshan is completely satisfied. To heck with the kingdom. Who cares? It's a piece of glass compared to this divine jewel, like that. Now, one of the prayers in the Bhagavatam I memorized is also very, very, wonderful. Very instructive for us. And he says, Bhakti moho bhavahatam chahime pasango bhuyad ananda mahatam amalashayanam yenanda sobadam aruvasanam bhavabdim neshe bhavad gunakatam atapanamatta. He's saying that, my dear Lord, here's my prayer. Let me always have the association of your great devotees, in whose hearts the bhakti toward your loving devotion to you flows like a very powerful river. Pravahata mahete prasango. Now this word prasanga is very significant because we all know the word sangha. We may not know it, but satsang is an English word now, right? It means it's been imported. A good association with sadhus, so we can learn something. So sangha means association, and it also means attraction, because from your association you develop your attractions, your attachments. So it's interesting. So here it means association. Please let me have prasanga, meaningful, intense association with your pure devotees in whose heart this bhakti, love for you, is flowing like a deep river. What's the result of that? Sangha. Mahatama Amalashyana means pure hearts. By which, Yenanda Sobanam Vyasanam Bhavabdim, by which association I will easily be able to cross over this very dangerous ocean, full of blazing fire-like dangers. He calls it an ocean, but it's also full of fire, the material world. Why? Neshe bhavat guna katamrata panamata, because I'm becoming mad to hear the nectar of your qualities and pastimes in holy name. In other words, by that transcendental sound, we become so pure that we can cross over birth and death because we no longer desire anything in this material world for sense gratification. We simply desire the Lord and His association and His service, and that's our ticket home. That's how you go back to Godhead. So now let's go back to our present verse, because here's the unsuccessful yogi. Now Dhruva was a successful yogi, clearly, But even if what Krishna is describing here, what he described, if you recall the description he gave in 20 to 23 of the results of samadhi, is also sign of what Dhruva experienced, and that is that in samadhi, the yogi experiences unlimited transcendental happiness through transcendental senses, and is undisturbed amidst any difficult situation. In other words, you've transcended all the difficulties of this world, and moment to moment you're experiencing the highest bliss. And as long as the body lasts, and then the body falls, and you go back to Godhead and continue that way, never to come back again. So that's the ultimate result. But Arjuna is explaining that for him and for people of his age, which is the latter part of the Dwapara Yuga, which is still, people live for 1,000 years and everything, but he's saying, I can't do it, my mind is too disturbed. If you recall, Chanchalam Himana Krishna, it's like trying to control the wind. So Krishna is encouraging. Yes, it's difficult, but it's good with practice. And Arjuna said, "Well, what if I'll be like a scattered cloud? There's a cloud comes, but then it gets scattered, and I won't have a place in the material world. I've given that up, gone to the forest, but I failed. Now I've lost both spheres. So Krishna says, no. In your next life, you'll be born even on the heavenly planets, and then you'll come down and Shuchinam Shrimatamke. But for the bhakta, for the pure devotee, being born in a wealthy family, that's not what they want. You don't want to be born you maybe want to be born in a family of devotees, whether they're wealthy or poor. That's the thing. But the Srimatam Gehe, and Shuchinam is described as pious living entities. It doesn't, a family of righteous people. It doesn't even say that they're, pure devotees. They're righteous, they're moral, they're following the Vedas, like that, That's not the aspiration of a real devotee. So, which was what Arjuna is. So the point is that this kind of, going to the heavenly planets for millions of years, give me a break, Where's the artik? Where's the kirtan? They may be singing something up there. They're devotees. But the problem is it's so comfortable and there's so many ways to enjoy up there that it's very difficult to have the impetus of the dangers of this, like we have here. This is a good place because we have the temple by Prabhupada's great effort and everything. But we know that it's a danger at every step. The climate is changing, not for the better. The political situation is horrendous. There's so many plastics, even poisons just going everywhere. It's a very dangerous place. So we have an advantage. That's an advantage once we come in touch with it, because we have to cry out with desperation. Krishna, please save me. Engage me in your service. Take me back. No, don't let me go to the heavenly planets. Forget that. There's a verse by a great devotee named Prabodhananda Saraswati. He was the uncle of Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, not Raghunath Das Goswami, Gopal Bhatta Goswami. And he was a wonderful devotee, very, very skilled in music and art and also in Sanskrit writing. He wrote a book called Chaitanya Chandramrita. all about the nectar of the moon of Lord Chaitanya. I recorded that book. If you're interested, I can give you the recording. Wonderful verses, and one verse Prabhupada would always quote from there, and it's exactly pertinent to this. So he says, Kaivalyam nadakayate, chidashapur akasha pushpayate, durdandendriya kala sarpa patali, prodkata dangstrayate, vishwam purna sukhayate, vidimahindradishtaki tayate, yat karunya kataksha vaibhavatam tam gaurame vastamak. So the last line, this is important to translate first. It means that one who has been empowered, who has been blessed and empowered by the merciful sidelong glance of Lord Chaitanya. And that doesn't mean that you have to be alive at the time. We can also be empowered. It means taking up his movement and his methods and worshiping him and following his lead and his followers' lead. Then here's the result. Kaivalyam narakayate. He gives a kind of a list, each one pertaining to different. Kaivalyam means merging, losing one's individuality and merging into Brahman. And what's the advantage? Oh, thank God. No more birth, no more death, no more old age, no more disease. I've transcended. I'm free. But for a devotee, he says, where's the kirtan? Where's the prasadam? Where's the devotees? There's nothing like that. You've given up your identity, your personal identity. You have no senses or anything. All you have is your pure consciousness. So it's kind of a relief. I'm not going to take birth again in one of these miserable bodies. But that's negative. That doesn't give you the positive of what real spiritual life is. We have an eternal form. The impersonalists, they deny that. They suppress that because they're afraid. If I have another form, it means I have another body. It means birth, death, old age, and disease. Not necessarily. Spiritual form is your eternal form. It's pure spirit. It doesn't take birth. Doesn't die. That's your eternal form in relation to Krishna. So for the devotee, that kaivalya is like going to hell. Better to be in hell and have some kind of body. At least you can cry out, Hare Krishna, as they're throwing you off the mountain or whatever, So, and then Tridashapur Akasha Pushpayate. Well, how about the heavenly planets? There's all varieties. He says, that's just like a sky flower. In other words, it has no meaning for us. How can I aspire for something that really has no meaning to me? It doesn't really exist. You don't care. Then he talks about the yogis. They're very difficult to control senses, which is what Arjuna is saying basically. Mind and senses go together. It's like they have the same senses are there. The devotees all have the eyes and the ears and everything, but the fangs have been pulled, meaning that the senses can't hurt you. They can't draw you away from Krishna because you're engaging them all in Krishna's service. We want to have ears so we can hear Krishna's service. We want to have the eyes to see the deities and to read the books. We want to have the hands to be able to worship the deity. So those are the same senses, but they're not like senses of ordinary people who are really tormenting them because they're dragging their consciousness here and there. So that Durdant Endriya Kala Sarpa Patali, so it's like the snake, but it has no fangs anymore, so it can't really hurt you. And then he says, this is classic Prabodhananda Saraswati. Vishwam Purna Sukhayate, the whole world is filled with happiness. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't perceive the misery of people who don't have Krishna consciousness, and we try to give them Krishna consciousness. But it's like Prahlad's mood, where he says, Naivod Vijay Paradada, I have no problem. I'm not disturbed at all. Because wherever I am, I can always chant your glories and dive into an ocean of happiness. And he proved it. When his father was trying to kill him, everything they had at that time, they tried to boil him in oil, crush him under the elephant, of course, pierce him with spears and everything, throw him off mountains, poison, everything. And he was completely absorbed in meditating on Krishna, on Narasimhadev, and he was protected, completely protected. He didn't feel anything. That's the state that he was in. So where is any misery for him? So he has no miseries, but he's very concerned. He's very concerned for those who don't have Krishna consciousness, who are suffering because of trying to enjoy materially in this material world. So that's the perfect state that can be reached. Vishram Purna Sakait, Vidimahindra. And then he says, all of these big demigods, such as Brahma, he mentions Brahma, and Mahendra, Lord Indra, we respect them, we don't insult them. But for us, they're no more important than insects. That's what uses that kitayate. We don't waste time trying to worship them, getting boons or anything with them. We don't need it. You just worship in Krishna. You're gone to the root, and that pleases the demigods more than worshiping them directly. To get boons, okay, is my take the boon, But someone is also a devotee of Krishna, then Lord Shiva, likes you even more, and what to speak of Brahma. So this is the difference between what Krishna will explain in a few verses. When he finishes this chapter, he'll wind up, and after Arjuna, you can imagine he's getting a little discouraged, because he can't do this yoga, and he knows that Krishna wants him to fight. He really doesn't want to fight. So then Krishna will say, "Don't worry." Just like Radharani has this mudra. This is a mudra. Mudras. I mean, we use them all the time. What? Or someone standing in the temple, like in the back of the temple, they just came for the first time, all right. What can you show me, right? Rather than this is a great mudra, So this is Radharani's mudra. There's a name for it. Abhaya Dan. Dan means gift. Abhaya means fearlessness. The gift of freedom from fear. Just worship us, take shelter, meditate on me. You'll be fine, like that. You give up fear. You'll be free. So that's what Prabodhananda is saying here, is that you can get the merciful sidewalk glance of Krishna, and you can see all these things as a straw in the street, and the one vow you say, yes, Krishna's lotus feet, that's everything. So now he's saying, you become, born in this righteous family, rich aristocracy. But now he's going to say the best birth. After you've actually made some significant progress in yoga, the best one, and that's in text 42. Unless someone has a burning question about 41.
I have a question.
Sure. Where's the mic? You have one. You have one. Oh, he has one here.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hari Bol.
So, my question is, usually the connection with Lord Shiva is easier. I've seen that while growing up and in my neighborhood and all that. But with Krishna, it takes time. There is sweetness, people feel a lot of sweetness when they go to Krishna temple. But they feel immediately a very strong connection with Lord Shiva and maybe Lord Hanuman or Lord Ram, different god and goddesses. So why is that? Why it takes a lot of effort to build a connection with Lord Krishna?
Well, I think that because the worship of Krishna is the highest. It's the highest. I mean, even you might say Vishnu is easy, Lakshmi Narayan is easier to approach. But he wants everything, and it's all, and also people realize, and that's Prabhupada tells this story even in relation to his own life. He was a family man, he was a businessman, and he was a successful businessman. And then, early on, he met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So he said, "Oh yeah, I'll use my, the money I make." When he was born, there was an astrologer who said, "Oh, you'll be, could be as rich as Birla, who's a multimillionaire, billionaire." So Prabhupada's, doing his business. By the time he met Bhaktisiddhanta, he already had one child. He was married, so he felt that he couldn't just take sannyas. So he went on, and he had a successful business, but he was also using as much time and energy, to help the Gaudiya Math, the story. So as time went on, he felt more and more responsibility in the Gaudiya Math, and he was spending more time. He wasn't giving as much attention to the business to really make it happen, And naturally, it didn't happen as much. There was a theft and failure and this and that. He had this league of devotees going. I mean, this was in his 50s by now. His kids were pretty well grown up. But, he still felt some responsibility. But he had a building. He had his first disciple, was a Sanskrit scholar named Acharya Prabhakar, who was helping him and preach, he's writing his books. And so he seemed like he would be able to do both, that he would be able to fulfill, because his sons were taking care of the business, he would take a little care, but then he would be able to preach. But then Krishna had other ideas. The building was taken away. He didn't really have it. It wasn't. He was being allowed to use it, but he didn't own it. And then it was resumed by the governor's wife or something who wanted to use it like ladies' auxiliary or something. Okay, so now they ended up going to Vrindavan, and eventually what happened is, by Krishna's grace, and there's a series of things that happened that seemed to be setbacks, but were actually, favorable for Prabhupada's ultimate renunciation. And his wife was not at all cooperative in the preaching. She just wasn't into it. And famously, she sold his Bhagavatam for tea biscuits. So at that point, Prabhupada said, look, it's either tea or me. And so she thought, yeah, right. So she said, well, it's tea, okay? She figured, okay, maybe he'll go off but then he'll come back like he always did. He went off, he didn't come back. And he took Vanaprastha at that time. But still, then there was the push for sannyas, So what happened is that Krishna kept taking things away. He lost everything. He was just poverty-stricken. He was trying to print his BTG. He was on the street in Delhi, had a heat stroke and all this stuff. So finally, after all that, he really had practically nothing. By great effort, he was able to publish the first 3 volumes of his Bhagavatam. I have a set of them. Maybe I'll bring them sometime. You see them; they're kind of worshipable. It took him 4 years to publish 3 volumes because he had no money. He had to use the first volume and to get donations to print the second volume. And finally, he was 60. He was 68. He was almost 69, and it was like now or never. I'm going to follow this order of my Gurudev to go to preach in English and foreign lands, or it's not going to happen. So he said, I'll do or die. At least I'll die trying. So he had to convince Sumati Maharaji, who said, no, Swami, I'm not going to give you free passage on the steamship because you're just going to go and die over there, So he had to sit in. There's a photograph of him sitting there in front of her office chanting japa, And as he tells it, he says her secretary came out and she went back and, that sannyasi is still sitting there, So finally, to her great credit, she gave him the free passage, famous passage. So the point is that Prabhupada says, he quotes this verse from what Krishna speaks to Yudhishthira. Yasyahamana gunnami harishe taddanankshanai. I forget the second part in Sanskrit, but I know what it means. He says, to those who I show my real mercy, I take everything away. Everything material away. Well, then what? Then they have no shelter. Their family doesn't want to, see him anymore. What use is it? He can't even, So therefore, they're forced to take shelter of me. They're forced to take. Prabhupada identified with that verse. And this is why people are a little bit afraid, because they know that Krishna is Hari. He takes everything away. Now, he also takes away your heart, if you let him. And that's really what's so valuable. That he'll steal your heart, meaning that you'll have nothing left but Krishna, so you'll be reliant and your love will be gone to him. But people get so enmeshed in the material world that they're afraid of that. They'd rather worship Shiva and have some prosperity, and be pious, And Ram also, the intimate association, like the standard of the gopis, which is really surrendering everything complete, is not so prominent with Lord Ram, right? So anyway, that's why I understand that, And Shiva is known as Ashutosh, meaning easily satisfied and easily angered too. But if you just put the bale juice on and everything you can get, But that's why the demons all worship him. Oh yeah, I can get what I want from Shiva. And sometimes it's a real problem with Vrakasura, Anyway, I'm not going to tell that story, but you can read it in the Krishna. And Ravana was a great devotee of Lord Shiva, And Banasura, there's trouble. Anyway, let's go on. We have some time. Okay, now, but even a better birth will be described now. Atava yoginam eva kule bhavati dhimatam etad didhulapataram loke janma yad idrisham. Or, if unsuccessful after long practice of yoga, he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Certainly, such a birth is rare in this world. Purport: birth in a family of yogis or transcendentalists, those with great wisdom, is praised herein because the child born in such a family receives a spiritual impetus from the very beginning of his life. It is especially the case in the Acharya or Goswami families. Such families are very learned and devoted by tradition and training, and thus they become spiritual masters. In India, there are many such Acharya families, but they have now degenerated due to insufficient education and training. By the grace of the Lord, there are still families that foster transcendentalists generation after generation. It is certainly very fortunate to take birth in such families. Fortunately, both our spiritual master, Om Vishnupad Sri Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, and our humble self had the opportunity to take birth in such families by the grace of the Lord. And both of us were trained in the devotional service of the Lord from the very beginning of our lives. Later on, we met by the order of the transcendental system. So this is, you'll find this in our line, very prominently. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, was the father of so many devotees. I mean, he had 10 children, and he trained them all in bhakti, and most prominent of which was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Brilliant kid, from like in 5, 6 years old, he had the whole Gita memorized. And he didn't just know the verses. I mean, that's the standard in the Gurukul. I learned this from going to Mayapur repeatedly. Is that they teach the kids how to chant, but they don't really teach them the meaning. How can they understand all the subtle meanings of the verse? Later on, they teach them all the meaning, But he understood how to explain every verse. He was 6 years old. I mean, he was so brilliant. Whatever he read, he never forgot. So you can imagine. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was very careful to train him, like that. And he became this very powerful acharya. This Gaudiya Math at its height was huge. It had centers all over India. He would have these vast festivals where they would have all of these, at that time there was no movies happening, but he had, what do he call them, dolls, or like we have here, but more elaborate, like you see in the corner there. But, but we all pastime. This is a little plaything of it, where you see Krishna's Leela. But you'd have, and there's some of that in Mayapur. You see there's a whole room where they have these elaborate dioramas, but they're like, sculpture of Lord Chaitanya's Leela and Krishna's Leela. So you would have a big field full of that. And people would come by the thousands, and kirtan and all of these things were going on. So huge preaching was going on, and Srila Prabhupada was part of that. He was also writing. He was very good at writing, and he would write for the magazines, different English magazines that were coming out. And then he started his own, the Back to Godhead, in 1944. So as he doesn't get into it here, but his father would, he was growing up his father was a wonderful devotee, and he saved him. His mother wanted to send him to England to become a lawyer, and get some real security, And his father said, no, he'll just get contaminated over there. We'll keep him here. And he had sadhus come. They would come every day, and he would ask to bless the boy that he'll become a servant of Radharani. And Prabhupada in one Prabhupada says, and that blessing was fulfilled. And he taught him the Mridanga drum. Prabhupada was an expert Mridanga. You can imagine the boys in the 26th 2nd Avenue. The first Mridanga comes. So I'm telling you, I lived down there in '68. I was just a couple of years late, and the connection what brought Prabhupada back down to the Lower East Side, where everything really started, was this restaurant called the Paradox Restaurant. It was completely vegetarian. It featured macrobiotic stuff. You could go in there for $1, get a big plate of rice and vegetables, and then you could hang out all day and get unlimited tea. and hear all these stories that people they're coming back from India, coming back from Taos, New Mexico, and all this stuff, you know. So that's where I was hanging out. And right next to that was an Indian musical instrument store. You go in, there's a tambura, and there's the sitar, of course, you know. So that's where this boy picked up his madanga right there, because it's a block away. You're 2 blocks away from 22nd Avenue, where, you know, this is, anyway, and is right near. So the boy walks up to the temple. This is Krishna's arrangement. The next day, they were scheduled to make this record, the first Hare Krishna record. Maybe some of you have heard it. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram. And there's an incredible madanga going on there. That's Prabhupada playing the madanga. He may have dubbed it in later, but that's him. No one else can come near to it. So how did he get the madanga? You know, it didn't come from India. At least not, but, you know, immediately. So some boy shows up the night before with a madanga. And Prabhupada says, oh, you know, give it here. So he gave it there, and Prabhupada started playing, and devotees were just, whoa, you know, this is like super excellent. Just another miracle that Swami's performing, you know. And so, but of course, he had to give it back to the boy. So he said, well, can you bring it tomorrow morning, you know, because we're going to make this record. I said, okay, you know, and they didn't say, oh, we'll never see him again, you know. There, sure enough, he showed up, and that madanga is on that album. It added a lot, you know, the madanga. So Prabhupada's father trained him in that. He wanted, I just heard it on the tape where Prabhupada was explaining, he wanted to have deities, because his father was worshiping deities, and right near where he lived, there was a temple with Radha Krishna deities, you know, you can imagine. So he said, I want to have some deities. So his father brought him these little deities, and he would offer everything, you know, he'd worship and everything. So this is the advantage of growing up in a devotee family. You know, you train, and everyone knows, you know, child psychology, what you learn in the first 5 years, that stays with you your whole life, you know. So anyway, this is the best birth, and in the family of real transcendentalists, you know, devotee life is the best. All right, so then Lord Krishna goes on here. Tattatam buddhi sangyogam labate bhavavadehikam yadate chatato bhuya Sangsiddhau Kurunandana. On taking such a birth, he revives the divine consciousness of his previous life, and he again tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success, O son of Kuru. Purport. Prabhupada gives example of King Bharat, who took his third birth in a family of a good Brahman, is an example of good birth for the revival of previous transcendental consciousness. King Bharat was the emperor of the world, and since his time, this planet has been known among the demigods as Bharatabarsha. Formerly it was known as Ilavratabarsha. The emperor, at an early age, retired for spiritual perfection, but failed to achieve success. In his next life, he took birth in the family of a good Brahmin and was known as Jadabharat because he always remained secluded and did not talk to anyone. And later on, he was discovered as the greatest transcendentalist by King Mahugana. From his life, it is understood that transcendental endeavors, or the practice of yoga, never go in vain. By the grace of the Lord, the transcendentalist gets repeated opportunities for complete perfection in Krishna consciousness. Of course, this King Bharat, he had to take birth as a deer first, we know that. But so, what this is a encouragement really for devotees ultimately, and that we've already had it in chapter 2 with Nehabhakamanashasti, that in this endeavor there's no loss or diminution. Any endeavor on this path protects you from the greatest danger. Who remembers what the greatest danger is? No, to lose your human form of life. We're all going to go through death. That's, you know. But to lose your human form of life and have to go back up through the species. So at least if you're a devotee, you're not, you know, whatever we've done already, if you just come to one Gita class, or nowadays you just press the right buttons on the computer and there's a kirtan. You say, how did I get to that line? And that's all you do. You know, you hear Hare Krishna for a couple of minutes. You're taking a human birth. You know, you got to hear the kirtan in the next life. You know? So this is very encouraging. And Siddhau, it's Sung Siddhau, that this is the best way to attain perfection. So nothing is lost. But how can we progress as quickly and as efficiently as possible toward the goal of life? That's what we should ask. And instead of deviating into Ashtanga yoga and trying to get some siddhis or whatever, you don't need that. There's no time. It's best to really become serious about Krishna consciousness. I see Baba's got serious. He shaved up. He's joining the ashram for the 6th time. I'm just kidding. No, he does invaluable work. This fountain was crying out for I've been here 30 years, for Bob's attention to fill it. And there's a whole adventure with this fountain. But now it looks like it's finally stabilized, easily cleaned. It's paka.
Looks better than before.
It definitely looks better than before. He painted it, reassembled the whole thing. We'll explain that some other time. Yeah, and he does it all, and he fixed the drain in the men's bathroom, and that was bothering me for years. Anyway, I won't go into that, but little things like that. He's doing very good. All right, it's almost time. Any questions? We're going to have to finish this chapter next week. Okay, we have time for 1 or 2 little poems. Our whole set of books that Srila Prabhupada, beginning with Bhagavad Gita, it's all songs, it's all verses. I mean, it's all poetry. This is Bhagavad Gita, right? So it's Sanskrit. It's a little hard to understand. We get, but songs can be in any language. So I took some of the Sanskrit verses and put them into English poems. One of my favorites is a very nice verse in Lord Chaitanya quotes from the Shastra. That is near the beginning of his instruction to Sanatana Goswami about the process of devotional service. So he says, here's the attitude we should have. Kamadinam katina katita padita dhurni deshas tesham jata mayna karuna natrapa nopashantihi utsrijayta natiyodapate sampratam labdha buddhis tvamayatak shadaramabhayam mam nayung svatmadase. In how many ways have I sought to obey the seductive demands of my wicked desires? They've shown me no mercy. Yet on I've gone shamelessly trying to quench lust's unquenchable fires. But now I'm rejecting these hellish desires, for my higher intelligence now has awoken. O Krishna, O shelter of fearlessness, please let me serve you with faith that will never be broken. Very illuminating. Is that the intelligence has to be awoken by sadhu sangha. But every time we read Prabhupada's books, we open it up, we're associating with this great sadhu, Srila Prabhupada, with his words and what to speak with Krishna directly. So that association, if we let that knowledge really enter deep in our heart and we try to mold our life according to it, then we're living this verse. Yeah, now I realize this desire, this anger, this passion, all of these things, they've been imprisoning me. They've been evil, cruel taskmasters, life after life. But now I'm not going to obey them anymore. But I realize I have to serve, so now I'm coming to you, Krishna. O shelter of fearlessness. Krishna's not trying to exploit us, he's trying to help us. Please let me serve you with faith that will never be broken. It's a very nice, and then he goes on to explain the process of devotional service. It's near the beginning. And maybe we'll deal with that soon. So that's one of my favorites. And then just one real quick one. These are the Krishna Karnamrita. This book was written, and as he's writing it, he's realizing that Krishna is enjoying it. That's why this is nectar for Krishna's ears. Only very few devotees are on that level that they can experience Krishna enjoying what they're writing. So Bivamangal Thakur was one of them. And in the course of writing that, he writes this simple, wonderful verse. Maduram maduram vaparasya vibhor, maduram maduram vadanam maduram, madugandhi madhusmita metadaho, maduram 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 maduram. Sweet, sweet is my dear Lord's form. Sweet is still his face, so fair. But his honey-scented, gentle smile is sweet beyond compare. So we can think of that as we see Radha Govinda. Radha Giridhari. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol. And thank you all for coming. This is